My name is Ashley. I'm currently a vibrant 43-year-old working hard and enjoying every day, but I couldn't say I was very happy 3 years ago. Back then, I was married, but not due to being widowed. Surprisingly, I was kicked out by my husband and found myself single. At the time, I was a homemaker, without children, with my husband, Greg. Despite this, Greg's parents frequently visited us. It wasn't that I was mistreated by my in-laws. In fact, my mother-in-law and I got along quite well, almost like friends. The lack of children between Greg and me wasn't a point of contention for his parents. After medical consultations, it was found that Greg, not I, was the reason we couldn't naturally conceive. I only learned Greg didn't believe the doctor's words when he decided to kick me out. Maybe his parents didn't pressure us about children because Greg's brother already had a family of his own. Therefore, I had no issues with my mother-in-law. However, my relationship with Greg, who should have been my closest ally, gradually worsened. Greg never openly ridiculed me, but after I turned 40, he began making disparaging comments while watching young idols on TV, implying I had aged beyond recognition. Comparing myself to 20-something idols is absurd. Naturally, I'd look older, but by the same token, Greg looked so much older compared to male idols in their 20s. Despite his efforts to maintain an appearance that fits the handsome uncle category, comparing 20s to 40s is ludicrous and petty. Occasionally faced with such remarks, I chose to ignore them, thinking it pointless to argue. Perhaps that was a mistake. Had I confronted Greg, telling him not to compare ages and that he too looked older than those in their 20s, maybe he wouldn't have acted so foolishly. But I avoided confrontation. As a result, I was thrown out of our home. The day arrived suddenly, but in hindsight, there might have been signs. Greg's returns home had been getting later and later. However, since he always said he was working overtime and would notify me by midday when he expected to be late, I didn't worry too much about it. So when Greg came home with a young woman and announced in front of me,
"From now on, I will live in this house with this woman. You need to leave quickly,"
I was utterly dumbfounded. What? What did you just say?
"Have you gotten so old that you're hard of hearing now? I told you to leave."
Since Greg and I got married when we were 25, we had at least 15 years of memories together. Considering that, Greg's demand for me to leave this house seemed utterly unreasonable. Furthermore, the woman he brought home was a mystery to me. When I asked, why all of a sudden, what happened? He just sighed. His frustrated demeanor only confused me more. He continued in his exasperated state.
"I said I'm going to live with this woman from now on. Why can't you understand something so simple? Just staying home all day dull your thinking?"
Greg always had a way of looking down on people. Maybe I had become numb to it. Normally, anyone would be upset by such sarcasm. Yet I had always excused it as just his personality. That's probably why he became someone capable of saying such terrible things. When I looked at the young woman next to Greg, wondering if he was cheating, she played with the ends of her hair, as if she had nothing to do with the situation. She was probably just finding split ends. Seeing me look at her, Greg stood in front of me and warned,
"If you do anything to her, I'll call the police."
It became clear that Greg saw me as no different than a stranger, making me suddenly feel sad. Perhaps I had lost his affection. However, I no longer have parents. Told to leave, I had nowhere to welcome me, and being a housewife, I had no place to stay or the means to rent a new place. Unsure of what to do, Greg grabbed my arm and dragged me outside.
"Anyway, someone your age doesn't suit me, so get out. Besides, I've been supporting a woman who can't have children like you. You should be thankful."
I was shocked by his words, especially since the inability to have children was diagnosed as Greg's issue, not mine. While I was stunned, Greg closed the door on me. Without even my shoes on, I was left outside, standing dazed for a while. Luckily, I had my smartphone in my pocket, so I called my mother-in-law. Crying, I told her Greg had kicked me out and that I was outside without shoes. She said she'd come with my father-in-law right away. When they arrived, they were shocked to see me sitting in front of the door without shoes or a coat and rushed over. They took me into their warm car and my father-in-law repeatedly pressed the intercom, but Greg ignored it. Eventually, Greg said,
"Cut it out, Dad. If Mom sides with her, I'll cut ties with my family."
Greg, infatuated with a much younger woman, didn't realize his actions were unreasonable. My in-laws, at a loss with Greg, took me back to their home. They fed me a warm meal, and as I realized how hurt I was, my mother-in-law comforted me while I cried. Greg thought I was helpless, but with my in-laws' support, I hired a lawyer and demanded compensation from Greg and his mistress. I got all my belongings back. I also made sure through my lawyer that they would compensate for any damage. The mistress had thrown away my clothes and sold my jewelry, thinking I was gone, so their compensation was added to the alimony. Because of this, they ended up paying more money than they would have otherwise. Greg and his mistress were ordered to pay me $60,000 together. Greg said,
"I'll pay it right away."
But when Kim asked if he planned to use the family savings and mentioned property division, he was at a loss for words. It seemed he intended to use the savings we had accumulated. We hadn't made any large purchases, so there was a considerable amount saved. Embarrassed, I hadn't realized he planned to use our savings for the alimony. Greg, wanting a quick divorce, went into debt to pay me $60,000 in one lump sum. It made me truly sad to think how much he wanted to be rid of me. In the end, my mother-in-law and father-in-law stood by me. Greg, choosing the other woman, was disowned by them and even his brother. I heard through the grapevine that once the mistress found out Greg was broke and in debt from the alimony, she left him immediately. She likely wanted a man with money, not a penniless 40-year-old Greg. Hearing this, neither I nor my in-laws felt sympathy for Greg. By then, I had moved with my in-laws, and Greg didn't know where they lived. A neighbor near my in-laws' former home told us they saw Greg break down crying when he found the house gone. After disowning Greg, my in-laws asked me,
"Would you like to be our daughter?"
I legally became their adopted daughter and lived with them as such. 3 years had passed since my divorce, and I had turned 43. It was then that I unexpectedly encountered Greg, whom I thought I would never see again. The reunion took place at a venue. This venue was hosting a party where individuals who had won a literary award were being honored, along with writers and members of the public who had gotten tickets through a lottery. Dressed appropriately, I arrived at the venue, only to find Greg outside the building.
"Huh? Ashley, why are you here?"
At first, I didn't recognize the person speaking so rudely to me. However, when he remarked,
"Oh, but you've always liked novels, right? Though I guess at your age, that's about all you can enjoy."
I immediately recognized the disdainful tone as that of my ex-husband, Greg. Could it be Greg?
"Yes, it's me. Couldn't you tell? Have you become even more dim-witted with age? I definitely don't want to age like you."
Despite his words, he is the same age as me. Regardless of his reluctance to age, it happens to us all, and it's ridiculous to act as if he's the exception. I sighed in exasperation. To think that I was tormented by such a foolish person 3 years ago makes me feel foolish myself.
"Why are you even here? Are you hoping to chance upon a favorite novelist of yours? Someone as old as you trying to get close to a novelist is obviously going to fail. Haha. You're just an older woman who can't even have kids. You should stop dreaming."
He intends to belittle me endlessly. It seems more absurd to me that he, who has no interest in novels, is present here. And why are you here?
"Huh? Oh, my current girlfriend. She loves novels and stuff. And she was thrilled when she won the lottery to be here, so I just dropped her off. Oh, and my current girlfriend is 32 years old.
I had no interest in knowing the age of the woman he's dating now, but it seems he wanted to brag. Probably because he knows I'm aware he was abandoned by the woman he cheated with. He wanted to seem better off now. No matter what he says, my interest in Greg is at an all-time low. Nothing he says can change my perception of him now. Ah, is that so? And what about it?
My current girlfriend is more intellectual than you, and unlike you, who were just a housewife, she actually earns her keep.
It was Greg himself who wanted me to be a housewife when we were together, and the woman he cheated with wasn't working either, so I thought that was his type. It seems paying alimony and various other expenses taught him the importance of money.
You must be broke, right? You were just a housewife, and even if you thought about working, it would have been impossible.
I was working at first, wasn't I? You begged me to quit my job.
What are you talking about? With an annual income of $10,000? That doesn't count as working.
That was after I quit the job because you said if I wanted to spend money, I should earn it myself, right? Yet you told me not to leave the house.
Even young people can easily surpass an annual income of $10,000 just by clicking around on a computer. You're just too old. Haha.
No matter what I said, he would concoct fantasies to mock me. I had no time to waste on such foolishness. I can't deal with this anymore, I said, and entered the venue. I could hear Greg laughing and calling me a coward from behind. Ignoring his voice, I greeted acquaintances at the venue and enjoyed the party, assuming Greg would be gone by the time I left. Contrary to my expectations, as I left the party, I heard Greg's voice saying,
"Oh, there she is. Kim, that's my ex-wife. I dumped her because she only made $10,000. Pathetic, right? I did the right thing by leaving that old woman.
Next to Greg was a woman in her 30s. She suggested leaving, likely because Greg had insisted on staying to show me off. I was amazed he could speak ill of his ex-wife in front of his girlfriend. When I stopped, the woman next to him widened her eyes in recognition. Wait, the person Greg is talking about is...
Huh? Kim, you know her? Small world, huh?
No, I mean, I know her one-sidedly. Don't you know? This is the female novelist, Ashley Ford.
Huh? A female novelist?
I can't believe it. You've been mocking Mrs. Ford? What do you mean by pathetic? Have you never read Mrs. Ford's novels?
Wait, hold on, Kim.
It seemed Kim was not as foolish as I had been 3 years ago. I had been a writer, but had to pause my career due to household responsibilities. Even though I was a writer, Greg disliked if I couldn't manage household chores, leading me to gradually reduce my writing time. I had worked while writing novels before marriage, but after getting married and quitting my job at Greg's insistence, I also had to stop writing. Interestingly, Kim had read an essay I wrote about almost giving up writing. You're the reason Mrs. Ford almost gave up writing? Unforgivable. I thought I finally found someone decent on a dating app, and then this? I can't believe it. I'm done with you. With that, Kim walked away angrily, ignoring Greg's plans to wait and threatening to call the police if he followed, calling him a stalker. Greg glanced at me and I said, "Looks like you got dumped. Who's pathetic now?" And just so you know, I've been very happy since you left. So please, don't try to involve yourself with me again. If you do, I'll have my lawyer send you a warning. I offered to drive Kim home since Greg had brought her and she had no ride back. She apologized for reuniting me with such a man, but we soon found common ground in discussing novels and became friends. After Greg's incident, it seems he couldn't stand the thought of losing Kim, whom he had just started dating after a long time. Despite Kim's lack of interest in rekindling their relationship and her immediate action to consult the police, Greg persisted. Kim moved quickly to a highly secure apartment, but Greg, mistakenly thinking she hadn't moved, broke into her previous apartment and was arrested for trespassing. Hearing this story from Kim, I couldn't help but laugh. This ensured that Greg would no longer trouble Kim or me. Now, I occasionally meet up with Kim to chat over coffee about the novels we've read, or go to the movies together, thoroughly enjoying life.